More than 250 experts in the traffic signals industry joined together in person to hear a range of papers here in Nottingham. These recordings are brought to you by AGD Systems, Colas, SRL Traffic Systems, Smart Video and Sensing, Vivacity and Unex Traffic.
So we are half of the editing team that's been working on the modelling guidelines update. Our colleagues Sally Bulmer and James Wilson unfortunately can't be with us today. But we should also mention the small army of modelling experts and operational experts who have been contributing to our document, both within TfL and across the industry, including our software suppliers, consultants and academic experts. So just to cover what we're going to be talking about today, Lucy's going to give some background to TfL and our responsibilities. We're going to talk about the modelling documents and modelling guidelines documents that we produce and what's changed since the last time we updated them back in 2010. We'll then go on to talk about how we've updated our guidelines to reflect the changes that have happened in London at that time, where to get hold of the guidelines, and where we intend to go in the future with them. So if I hand over to Lucy to talk about TfL.
Okay, so as a bit of a background, under the Traffic Management Act, the roads TfL are responsible, well, we've got the TLRN that we're responsible for in red, I think it was, and then we also have a vested interest in the strategic road network, which, although that's managed by the boroughs as a local transport authority, we're also concerned about those for bus routes, and we are responsible for the 6,500 traffic signals, or approximately that number of traffic signals within London. And so the Traffic Management Directorate have a responsibility to help manage the operation of the network, and amongst other teams as well, the day-to-day operations handled by, we've got the Network Performance Delivery team, who do the planning and the timing reviews of the signals on the system. We've got the people in the control centre who manage events and incidents on the network. And then the team that Rob and myself are in are the modelling and visualisation teams. So we work closely with the Network Performance Delivery team and help them assess any schemes or and predict any impact on the network. And just to highlight, we're not the only modelling team in TfL. We also have the city planning and public transport service planning teams who are responsible for the policy planning and then public transport side of modelling. So we're talking today on the guidance documents that more relate on the operational side of assessments. And a recap on why we feel modelling is important and why we need the guidelines. So we just need to make sure that the models that are produced are fit for purpose. They can clearly express any implications of any schemes on our networks, and we make sure that we're reporting any results as in a standard format and make sure that anyone can make informed decisions on what to put on. Handing over to you.
Right, so these are the two main modelling guidelines, modelling documents that we produce within network management. So we have the traffic modelling guidelines and the model auditing process. These are complementary documents that form part of an overarching modelling guidance framework. So the model auditing process sets the benchmark for the standard of models that we require at TfL and the acceptance criteria that we need for them. And the modelling guidelines provide general advice on how to build models in a consistent manner with what we regard as best practice. The modelling guidelines is structured into separate parts. So part A is aimed at a non-technical audience. So that's scheme developers, promoters, people that have to have an awareness of modelling and have to interact with modellers and model results, but don't necessarily need to know the detail. And the parts B and C in the modelling guidelines, they're focused on technical modellers, practitioners to describe modelling techniques. So the model auditing process, it was produced back in 2007. The last version was produced in 2017. It ensures that models are built in a transparent and consistent manner and with a number of defined roles and responsibilities so that everyone involved in model development is aware of what needs to be done and when. So we have defined roles for both TfL and whoever is submitting the models to TfL with their defined responsibilities. MAP is a 6-stage process where we have stages 1 to 3 guiding model developers through base model development and 4 to 6 through proposed model development. At stages 1 and 4, there are meetings held with all parties to discuss the scope of modelling, what's required, and that is documented within a modelling expectations document. So from the start of modelling, everyone is fully aware of what is expected. Stages 2, 3, and 5 are modelling software specific. They have detailed checks on particular areas, and it's not possible to proceed to the next map stage until the previous map stage is completed and approved. That way we pick up on any modelling issues at an early stage so that they can be remedied before you get too far down the modelling project where it becomes a bigger problem to sort them out. You'll see there are speech bubbles on the arrows between map stages. That is because we encourage informal communication throughout the modelling process between TfL and whoever's submitting the modelling. Although there are formal check sheets at the map stages, we feel that an informal communication is the quickest way to address any issues during development. And at map stage 5, we have a signals engineer to check any proposed designs conform to current TfL specifications and safety standards. And finally, at map stage 6, we have assessment of the outputs from the models, where decisions are taken on scheme approval, depending on what the modal impacts are. As far as the modelling guidelines is concerned, we've been producing that since 2004. Over time, we've issued several versions of the guidelines. They've gradually got bigger, and it's taken us longer to update them. One thing we've been asked for quite a while now is when are you next going to update the guidelines, and what have you been doing all this time? So in a very crude, unscientific manner, if you look at the page count, our generation of advice has actually been increasing over that time. It's just taken us a while to get around to publish it. Over to Lucy. So
it's been a long time since 2010. So there have been quite a few things that have changed in London in that time. So on a political note, we've got a new mayor, and with that, we had a new priority of the healthy streets approach. So our priority went along with active modes of travel, so cyclists and pedestrians, and less focus on smoothing traffic flow. In terms of physical layout, as part of the road modernisation plan, we had a whole host of schemes going in on the network all together, and so we realised that you can't assess things all in isolation with everything going on all, at the same time. And also demand has been constantly increasing, and together with the Healthy Streets approach, we saw an increase in cyclist proportions going up as well on our total traffic numbers, and other items such as the low emission zones and things that changed the demand of traffic in London. So we've also seen changes in modelling methodology. So following on from all those schemes being put on the network at the same time and realising we can't assess a scheme in isolation, we developed the 3-stage modelling process to make sure that we were capturing what the end operation of the network would be with all those schemes working together. So obviously still have to have your base layout set out, base model set out correctly, but then we went on to the future-based scenario with all the estimated schemes in your future year included, apart from the one you're going to be testing, and then bringing on, you do something model when you actually include the scheme into the mix there. We've also, with modelling methodologies, had to assess better ways of getting cyclist and pedestrian results to be able to assess those impacts, so we can focus on the schemes that would promote those. And there's been a lot more advances in data, so we've had to come up with more tools to process those and help with our modelling. And modelling software themselves. So again, we've got new modelling software that came through as part of a procurement process for TfL, and also in 10 years, a lot of the software had changed, had new versions, so there's a lot of new functionality that just isn't captured in the version 3 of the modelling guidelines. And internally for TfL, we've got our UTC to microsim interface and other modelling tools that we've developed as well, so they need to be captured in the guidance documents. I think I'm handing back over to Rob.
Right, so in terms of how we've adapted the modelling guidance to reflect these changes since the last update, the broad content of Part A remains the same in that it's still high-level, non-technical detail for non-modelers, but we've updated it to reflect changes in legislation and transport policies, particularly the Mayor's transport policy and the introduction of Healthy Streets Initiative. We have updated the reference to the three-stage modelling process, so non-modelers are aware of those changes. And we've also updated the references to TfL structure, because over the last 10 years, our structure has changed, teams have changed, so we've brought it up to date with the current context for who handles different bits of the process. Part B of the guidance is detailed technical guidance for modelers. The first chapter is generic guidance that applies to all modelling types. That's been brought up to date to reflect new data sources and more detail on the three-step modelling process. The subsequent chapters are more software focused, so we've had a number of changes there. We have a new chapter on Aimson modelling, following on from the publication of the Aimson model auditing process back in 2017. We have a rewritten highway traffic assignment chapter that's been brought up to date. As far as LINSIG is concerned, when the last guidelines were published back in 2010, announced at the JCT conference at the time, we were still using LINSIG 2. So we didn't use LINSIG 3 until 2011, so Modelling Guidelines 3 had LINSIG 2 content for a long time. So that's been brought up to date to LINSIG 3. Transit's been brought up to date to include Transit 12 and Transit 16 content, and VISM has been brought up to date to reflect recent VISM versions. And finally, the new part in Modelling Guidelines 4 is focused on healthy streets, with the current policies obviously raising the priority of considerations for vulnerable road users, pedestrians, and cyclists. So we've introduced new guidance in this section. Obviously, modelling vehicles is fairly well understood. Modelling pedestrians, cyclists, and emissions presents some more challenges, but out of necessity, because of the changes in London over recent years, we've had to model them. So we've documented how we've modelled it and given our considered opinion on what we regard as the best practice at the moment. We're very much aware that this is emerging guidance and likely to change over time. So this is something that we expect to change in the future and evolve, and we certainly invite any feedback from people with experience in these areas that would like to contribute their thoughts.
Okay, so it's not quite ready yet. It's imminently, version 4 of the document's imminently going to be released, say, in the next week or so, but definitely by the end of the month, and it'll be available on our website. And if anyone wants to be notified when it is ready, then just drop us an email at the Modelling Guidelines mailbox, and we can let everyone know once it does go live. And as well, if there's any content or update, let us know. We're happy to have any conversations with anyone on the guidelines themselves. And we are going to do a TfL launch event as well, so that's probably towards the end of October. And we are planning to keep it updated and not leave it another 10 years before we do it again. So, like I said before, welcome any input and from anyone else in terms of what needs to be included or any comments on the emerging content that we've just added. And we know we're going to have to include new modes such as e-scooters, autonomous vehicles, and other developments that go on. So we're making sure we catch them as regularly as possible. So yeah, and just to close up, so obviously we've kind of gone through what our responsibilities are, what the guidance documents are at the moment, and then obviously how things changed in the last 10 years in London and what we've hopefully captured in Modelling Guidelines version 4 to make sure we're not leaving those out and that we don't want to leave it another 10 years before we do it again.
Good, thank you. I liked to see that famous London Bridge that you had at the end there. I did recognise a few of my old haunts from walking over to the old traffic control systems unit in Smith Square, and the bicycle park outside of the City Farm. I was there like a week ago, actually. So yeah, all these sites. Not quite released yet.
No, imminently, we didn't manage. We had to change our focus to the presentations rather than the last few editing tasks, and we're waiting on the last external review comments as well. So,
well, I was going to ask that actually. You know, what sort of feedback have you managed to have with sort of external organisations about the changes this will have? Because presumably for people promoting some of the schemes, it will incur additional costs to them and more work, basically.
Well, it is just guidance on the software. So hopefully a lot of these would have been already being incorporated, as we haven't just been sticking to version 10 and Linzig version 2 for the last 10 years. We have been incorporating them. So they're kind of been going on through the MAP discussions. We've been incorporating a lot of this already. But in terms of review, it's Pilu. Dr. Williamson, he's been reviewing it at the moment. So we've already had part of his comments back and just waiting for the last section. I think we wanted to stick with the quote that he said impressive when he realised how many pages there were to review. We thought we'd just stick with that quote. So yeah, we're going through that process.
Brilliant, yeah, because I think, you know, it's actually quite a well-used document outside of London as well. So I don't know how obvious that is to you guys in TfL, but I know quite a few other locations actually use it as a base for their work as well. So it's interesting to see that. Anyway, sorry, I won't hog the questions. Any questions at all from the floor? Oh, come on, there must be something. Right, in the middle here. Thank you. Oh, yeah. Go there first.
I got the mic. Hi, Andy Parfitt from South Gloss. Does TfL have a priority table for the different modes of transport? For example, do pedestrians have a higher priority than your cyclists, and do you model that?
Yes, so the Healthy Streets content of the Mayor's transport policy certainly puts the vulnerable groups at the top of the table, and our guidance document does adopt the hierarchy that's in the DfT traffic signs manual, with pedestrians at the top, cyclists getting down to vehicles lower down. So whereas previous administrations probably focused, were seen to focus more on vehicles, pedestrians and cyclists are very much at the top of the table nowadays, as far as consideration. Okay,
that's interesting. I have noticed recently an awful lot of cycle schemes going in, which appear to negatively affect pedestrians, and I've literally experienced schemes where cycling lanes are going in and they're having to remove puffing crossings to do it.
Certainly, on a scheme-by-scheme basis, as far as the modelling is concerned, the impacts for all different modes are separated out, and they're all considered in the scheme approval process. So I don't know about the particular scheme you're talking about, but I would suggest sending feedback in if you feel that pedestrians have been disadvantaged, but I'm sure they would have been taken into consideration during the scheme development, and there may be reasons that we're not aware of why.
Yeah, okay, thank you. It's just this idea that in modelling maybe people are looking at where the money is and will model this without perhaps realising that there may be a higher priority for another mode of transport?
I mean, I think as traffic engineers and modelers over the years, we've always had the responsibility to share out finite resource amongst competing modes. The latest guidance places a great emphasis on people's health and the effects of that, which has maybe shifted focus nowadays, but ultimately it's still about balancing act, and you can't please everyone, so it's just getting the best outcome possible for all modes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, so part C, which I think is going to be very useful content about this kind of healthy streets approach, is that kind of influence on the kind of the walking, cycling and emissions. Is that content just is that kind of informing just the cost-benefit analysis, or is that also having an impact on the approach to model validation?
I'd say it's more in terms of the model validation, so like how to incorporate cyclists into either your deterministic models, or the new methodologies have come about to make sure you're accurately capturing them in micro-simulation modelling as well. So, and although pedestrian modelling isn't probably quite as a new methodology as cycling, we're still making sure we're capturing and documenting all the processes that have been, the knowledge that's been developed internally and probably externally as well during those 10 years, so that it's there as guidance for any new models that are being created, so we can get the most accurate results for those modes.
Thanks. I think it's all going to be looking through it with interest, because it's a very, there's a lot of weight on this area at the moment. Yeah, thanks.
Great, thank you. So if we could say thank you to Lucy and Robert.